Some of these kingdoms, some of these Muslim dynasties and empires, they were not noble themselves, right? They engaged in acts that was just purely economic. They engaged in not necessarily da'wah. But nonetheless, with even that, they followed that sort of quote unquote diplomatic relations that the Prophet ﷺ set in place, and they followed it on. So nobody actually even pushed it on. And you could see this lesson in that history which we just mentioned with the piracy. The Sahaba and the Tabi'in that came in, they engaged with these pirates, but they always pushed them back and never came with them. To the point they sacked their bases. They came to Eritrea, they came to what is today, back in the day called Adalis, but modern day Massawa area stuff. They came, and then the Halak Island, they came and they sacked it, and then they went back. They could have conquered it because the Halak Island is a very strategic area, which we will see down the line centuries later.
That's fascinating because when we hear, now we know that the early Muslim conquest did not go to West Africa, so that's out of the question altogether.
Yeah.
So the closest region, if you talk of Africa, would have been East Africa.
Sure.
And we often hear the falsification of history that the Muslims, the Arab Muslims, raided African villages or kind of almost targeted black nations to take slaves. And here you're telling me that actually the state policy at the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and down the line was that we do not attack. The closest region in Africa, which is East Africa, there's no attack. And even when they come to us as pirates, or they come to us in a provocative manner, we repel them, but we do not pursue them into their land to conquer their land, which is a very interesting, very fascinating narrative actually.
In many times, the Muslim powerhouses located in Persia, which is Shiraz, basically Transoxania area, Ma Wara al-Nahar, which is known in our literature, in our Muslim literature, Ma Wara al-Nahar, where the Persians ruled, the Burji dynasty ruled, where the Fatimid ruled in Cairo, where Allah Musta'an, the Abbasid ruled in Baghdad. All these hubs where actually powerhouses existed that vied for positions of Khalif, and they always clash with one another. The consequence has always been that the ulama, the rich people, the people with name, the people with reputation, however do not want to be caught up with political strife, one of the first places that ended up going was to Mogadishu.
Wow.
One of the first places that they were migrating was, from hopping. Like we have a scholar by the name of Qalhati, for example, who lived around the 5th century Hijra, very famous scholar. He left basically Shiraz. Shiraz is at that time the height of Islamic civilization. The madarises are built everywhere. Imam Ghazali and Juwayni, they lived there. Their outpouring and the things that they've produced in terms of knowledge for us today that we have. So these people, person like him runs away, comes to Yemen, and you would think, oh, Yemen is, this Islamic center, stay there, teach there, get a position there, develop, But he just stays there, but he doesn't want to stay in Yemen or Aden or Zabit or all these places that he went to. Despite the leaders in Yemen at the time, who were the Banu Mahd, asking them to stay, we give you position, we give you wealth and stuff because of his reputation. But no, he wants to go to Zayla, he wants to go to Mogadishu, and he eventually hops up on a bit. Unfortunately, he doesn't arrive because he dies through the shipwrecking, right? Okay. And so we have series of names like this consistently, that people who actually leave Yemen, people who leave Persia, people who leave the Hijaz, people who leave Syria, that actually cross all these places and they want to settle in Mogadishu, they want to settle in places like this. And
from that very enlightening kind of discourse, you've given us a lot to think about, because we're seeing not only a reception in Mogadishu, whereby peace is sought, so from scholars coming abroad, as far as Shiraz, which is in the Persian kind of mainland, seeking shelter and peace, but also an external mission. So people leaving Mogadishu or regions within that part of the world and going into Yemen, which is known as a traditional home for the early Muslim community as well, but across even as far up as the Maldives, spreading the deen. So that's actually very interesting, because I never saw it that way. You know, the mission from Somalia or from the Horn of Africa into the other parts of the world with very capable, very highly placed individuals. These were not just ordinary teachers. They were 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐄, people who are considered, you could almost say, masters of their disciplines, spreading the word across. And as you mentioned earlier in the discussion, they were not slaves who were brought into Arabia and suddenly became, because of these people came with knowledge. They came as free people. They came as people who were recognized and actually welcomed.
And was trusted that way.
And trusted, yes.
Yeah.
And Said of Mogadishu being one example of many.
A great scholar called Abdul-Malik ibn Habib was a 9th century scholar, an Andalusian scholar who wrote a book called Adab al-Nisa. He spoke about when he went to Medina, and he was just around the period of Ajahid as well. He spoke about when he went to Medina, he was shocked at the amount of beautiful women wasn't even covered, like in terms of they were bare-chested. And he spoke about this in the 9th century. Similarly, you had Imam Malik prior to him, he spoke about, and he was troubled, although he knew that it wasn't required by Islamic law for the women to cover their chests. He just asked the governor to try and make.
When you say chest, what does that mean?
Their breasts, their breasts, yeah, they were bare-chested, so their hair was out because they wasn't required.
Cleavage and stuff like that.
Yeah, not the cleavage, the breast was out. So it's important that people understand this, because, and these are.
And sorry, brother, we need to stop here. Let's stop here. You mean to tell me that in the 9th century, in Medina, not London, not Paris, there were women who had hair out, and you could see the breasts effectively in Medina? Is that what we're saying?
Yes, a historical fact.
And Islamically speaking, the law does not require for them to cover that up because they're not Muslim?
No, the law doesn't require to cover them up, even the Muslims.
You kind of, you roll your eyes when you hear, especially in Seerah, when again and again you hear a cut and paste job, and you hear the same mistakes without analysis, and then you're thinking, yes, in a coffee house or in like in a mosque, or when you're giving these talks to people hundreds of years ago, 600, 700, 800 years ago, you're rousing the crowds. No one's going to challenge you. But today your books are out in the West, and people are picking apart each of your arguments, and unfortunately Muslims don't have answers, no matter how much they would like to think they have answers. Yes, you can have an answer in theology because you've honed that skill for 1400 years. You'll have an answer in usul of your particular school, but Muslims haven't honed their history. All too often when you look at any Muslim source about any event, for them it's all divine hand and it had to happen and that's it. Yeah, but he goes, not one of them is looking at Muhammad ﷺ as the man and his own decisions. Another problem is that the Seerah is taught it's taught from English books. So once you're translating, you're getting a book. Many people use the Sealed Nectar, which is a book that I really wouldn't recommend, and I really don't even like that book, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And then there are other books that people use as well. Martin Ling's book is a good book, but there's problems with that as well. And then the problem is that once you're teaching through English, right, that text is fixed. It's already been translated and it's fixed. So you can no longer analyze that text and derive anything further from that text. And if you try to derive something from that text, it's going to take you more off the path.